Bulking is dead. Or is it? Every fall, guys convince themselves that it is the winter arc and it's time to absolutely eat like an a-hole, throw on a double XL hoodie and just look like garbage, to then have to just do a super long cut in the spring to look even half decent for the next summer or next show season. So I'm gonna walk you guys through how to properly think about putting on muscle in the most effective way. This is the last video you will ever need to watch. It's gonna cover your training, your nutrition, your supplementation, gut health, sleep, enhancement, you name it. I'm gonna walk you guys through it in this video. Without further ado, let's get into the core principles of what makes a proper bulk or progression phase. As an IFBB pro bodybuilder, I've made a ton of mistakes myself in my 20 plus years of training. I've also coached over 1,000 people. And the biggest thing I see is either going too far or not going far enough when it comes to calories, training, recovery. So we're gonna find that sweet middle ground that's gonna get you the most out of your progression phase. First, let's explore why a very slight surplus is actually very beneficial for growth. In an evolutionary sense, if energy is scarce, muscle building is going to be the last thing that's prioritized. So that's why it's super important to be in this very slight surplus so we can signal our body to understand that we can allocate some of those calories to facilitate muscle protein synthesis towards our training, towards our recovery, and actually get substantive growth. So the research actually does support this. So in a series of meta-analysis, participants actually will gain more muscle in a slight surplus than in a deficit state. And what that's telling us, and it's not because a caloric surplus directly enhances muscle protein synthesis, it creates the environment that allows for training to be better, recovery to be better, all these things that are ancillary to muscle growth to be at a much higher capacity. So let's get into the actual caloric surplus that you will need to be in this sweet spot. And so what I tell people, it's as simple as this. You wanna shoot for anywhere from a 200 to 400 calorie surplus above and beyond what you're burning on a given day. And so this is why I suggest a 200 to 400 calorie surplus, because every single day, your expenditure is going to be different. So what this 200 to 400 calorie buffer does is just make sure we don't fall into a deficit on a given day. So that's what most people think they're doing when they're main gaining. They're actually eating this, let's say slight 200 calorie, 400 calorie surplus, because some days they're not gauging how much expenditure they actually have relative to their intake. Okay, so let's talk about the macro breakdown by macronutrient. So we're talking about protein, carbs, and fats. Everybody thinks that you want to be super high on protein to maximize muscle protein synthesis, to maximize growth. There's some studies that have shown that even 0.5 grams per pound of body weight is plenty. For more experienced lifters or people that are in the gym 3 to 5 days a week, I would say go closer to 0.8 to 1 gram of pound of body weight, especially if you're not like crazy levels of body fat. If you're 30% body fat, you could be a little bit lower because you're basically only need enough protein to feed your lean mass. You don't need protein to feed your fat mass. So if you're anywhere below 20%, I'd say shoot for that 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of body weight of protein. So the reason I don't go super high on protein is extremely satiating, meaning it's extremely filling, but it's gonna put a large tax on your digestion, it's gonna put a large tax on your kidneys. And so what you wanna do is keep it at a point where it's enough to maximize growth, but not so much that it's basically hampering your digestion. You want to push more of those calories to carbohydrates, which are easier to break down, more readily available as energy, and that's going to be our next macronutrient. So what I want you to do is take your total calories that you found above maintenance, you want to subtract out the protein, and now you'll have a ratio of what you have left between carbs and fats. And then once you've taken the protein, subtract out your protein, which is 4 calories per gram, you subtract out, let's say 70 grams of fat, which is 9 calories per gram, you're going to be left with the rest of your calories, which then you can allocate completely towards carbohydrates. So that take that final amount of calories, divide it by 4, and that's where you're gonna be left with your carbohydrate total. And that, I think, is the optimal way to grow, is by maximizing carbohydrates, keeping protein in a moderate range, and then keeping fats on that lower end of the scale. So let's talk about your most important nutritional window. If you are bulking and you're waking up and you're doing fasted weight training, like, oh, it makes me so mad. All my clients be like, yeah, I just was like, feeling really good this week. I did all my workouts fasted. And I'm not saying that you can't have a decent workout fasted, but every piece of research is gonna show you that if you're fed, you're gonna have a better workout, better recovery. So that peri-workout window means pre, intra and post training. And what I suggest is centralizing a good amount of fast acting carbohydrates in this window. And it's also gonna help you to take some of your carbohydrates from the rest of the day, because let's say you spend like a little bit of time getting to the gym, your workout, maybe a little post-workout cardio. That's a big window where you're not eating. So what I'd suggest is 50 to 75 grams, even up to 100 grams of simple carbohydrates. What I mean by that, it doesn't have to be all sugar, bananas, honey. So a good example of this would be some rice cakes with some honey on it for that pre-workout. Then I would do 30 to 50 grams intra. You can use Gatorade powder, you can use Carbolin, you can use cluster dextrin. And then post-workout, I would do something fast acting with a whey isolate, or if you can't do whey or hydrolyzed whey, then I would go with something like beef protein or something like that. You can absorb quickly right after your workout and pair that with some fruit, some more Carbolin, things like that, 50 to 75 grams post-workout. So, all right, let's get into food sources. And I'm gonna put this as simply as I can. Let's go 80% from, let's say, whole food single ingredient, and 20% from, let's say, sourdough bread, Rice Krispie treats. This is a phase, guys, to have a little bit more levity and focus on things that you digest well. I still suggest you have a good amount of fruit and vegetables for fiber, for gut health. People will move away from this completely and they'll just focus on all calories. And what that's gonna do is it's going to reduce the healthy gut biome you have. It's gonna reduce your ability to digest food. So please, guys, do not move away completely from raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, things like that. Fruit, vegetables, kale, cabbage. Like, I know I'm just saying like probably the ones people hate the most, but find the vegetables you actually like and keep them in your nutrition at a moderate clip, but also finding foods you actually enjoy. Okay, let's talk about insulin resistance. So what is insulin resistance? As we put on more weight, we're shoveling food in our mouth, we put on too much body fat, it's gonna get even worse because you're gonna be able to process carbohydrates less and less efficiently as you put on more body fat. So you're just gonna get more fat as you keep eating more carbs. So that's why we wanna keep cardio in, we wanna keep steps up, we wanna stay as lean as possible in this phase so we don't become insulin resistant, we don't just keep making it worse and worse and compound over time. Now we have to talk about what actually creates growth, which is the stimulus, which comes from training. And I'm gonna walk you guys through the perfect training mentality and also the biggest mistakes you might be making right now in your training regimen. Okay, so you could be eating perfectly every macrogram, sodium tracked. And if you are not going to the gym and training hard, none of it matters. And I know that might sound obvious, but that's why some people get frustrated. They are perfect on their nutrition. They're sleeping 8 hours a night, but they see the guy that's kind of eating like an asshole, but trains really, really hard and is making more progress than them. So that just goes to show that training is so important, obviously, within the confines of staying healthy and training with good efficiency. So we're gonna walk through how to maximize your training. So let's talk about training split. Is a 5-day split best, a 3-day split best. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is hit every muscle group twice per week within a structure that we have enough recovery. And you can do this with anywhere between a 3 and 5-day training split. I'm usually more partial to a 4 to 5, but if you're really busy, you can get plenty from a 3-day full body split where you're still targeting everything twice per week. So there's a lot of conflicting research on volume, how many sets you have to do per muscle group to basically maximize growth. So really what it comes down is to hard training with good proximity to failure. And so I would shoot for anywhere between 10 to 15 hard sets for a muscle group per week, however you'd like to split that. And also remember that there are compound lifts that hit multiple muscle groups. So if you're doing, let's say, an RDL or a deficit RDL, you're gonna be hitting your adductors, your hamstrings, your glutes, even a little bit of lower back, spinal rectors, all in one movement. So don't just think that, okay, because it's a deficit RDL, it's just hamstrings. There are multiple muscle groups involved with that movement. So if you're looking at your total set volume for the week, let's go upper body example. If you're doing like a compound plate loaded press, right, you're gonna be getting a little triceps and front delts as well. So those could be basically half sets. So I don't want you guys to get too in the weeds for your actual number of working sets. I would just say try to make sure that you're targeting every muscle group, especially priority muscle groups, with at least 10 hard working sets per week, taking close to failure. All right, so let's talk about proximity to failure. Are we going to like gun to the head failure every single set? Absolutely not. We want to shoot for that 0 to 2 reps in reserve with really, really good form. What I mean by that is if your reps start to shorten towards the end of the set or get really fast or explosive and take over with other muscle groups just to get more reps, that is not what we're shooting for. We want to keep that first rep looking exactly like the last rep with that concentric speed slowing down. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're doing a hack squat, right? And you get to the bottom of the rep and you shoot out of it on your last rep, you're probably not that close to failure. If you get to the bottom and it's about half the speed or a third of the speed as what you did on your first rep on that concentric phase where you're not trying to go slow, that's a good indicator that you are actually close to failure. So that's a better way, especially for beginners, to understand, because there could be perceived failure because like it burns or hurts, but that's very different from true mechanical failure where your muscles are just not able to perform the rep. And one last pitfall to mention in this bulking phase, you're gonna wanna chase PRs, you're gonna wanna put more weight on the bar, on the mechanism, on the stack. It doesn't always mean that you're driving more stimulus, because you might be shortening the rep, you might be speeding up the rep, you might be using ancillary movers, momentum, lower back in order to get the movement done. And that doesn't mean that you're getting stronger or bigger in that target muscle group. It just means that you've gotten more efficient at moving that weight from A to B, or found a little cheat code, because your body's always going to try to find that fastest way or the easiest way to get something done. So don't always get so tied to the logbook. And that's why, if you guys want perfect programming that actually reads your biofeedback, I have created an app called the Sculpted app. So if you guys are interested in that app or learning more about it, the link will be down in the description. All right, how about intensifiers, drop sets, partial reps? I wouldn't overcomplicate it. Unless you're like at the advanced level, I would just take really, really good form sets, close to failure, no supersetting, especially no same muscle group supersetting. You don't want to feel like you're dripping in sweat just to say you're dripping in sweat. Just because you feel like you're working harder doesn't mean that you're actually driving more growth. So no same set, no same muscle group supersets, no drop sets. Just take really, really good sets, close to failure. Recovery, I'm going to keep super short. Sleep at least 8 hours a night. Get your steps in, get your cardio in. Don't try to kill yourself with like 3-hour sessions. And it's as simple as that. I think the sleep is the biggest part, but those are my biggest things. Kind of the things you would think of, the boring stuff. Those are the things that really you want to check those boxes as well. Gut health and digestion, I touched upon earlier. You want to pick foods that you digest well, you enjoy, but also keeping micronutrients in your protocol. So fruits, vegetables, those are going to be really, really important tools that keep your gut health and gut biome in a good spot, help you digesting well. Stock tracking and progress. So what are our main indicators that we are making progress in our off-season phase? So number one is just leading into scale weight. I would do weekly averages. So just weigh yourself every morning, fasted, no water, wake up, take a pee, take your fasted weight, average it over the week. That's gonna be so much more telling than just taking a single weight at the end of the week, because you might get discouraged. And then training feedback. This is probably gonna be one of your most important biofeedback metrics. So is your strength going up? But not just in terms of the number that you're putting on the bar, but how you're performing that movement. So if you're doing your hack squats 2 or 3 inches deeper with your torque wedge with the same weight, that is progressive overload. You don't just have to put more weight on the mechanism to make it harder. You can do the movements with more range of motion, more efficiency, slower into that eccentric phase, more concerted drive through that target muscle group. And you're going to be, that is one modality of progressive overload. Lastly, I would say body measurements. I don't lean into these as much because realistically, let's say you're training your arms in your off season, you might artificially increase the size with a little layer of body fat. And then on the flip side, when you're cutting, you might think your arms are disappearing because you're losing some of that body fat, which is also going to lend to the circumference. As you put on a little bit of body fat and also fullness and glycogen, that can also artificially increase the size for those measurements. So when do we need to make changes in a progression phase? And the answer is, it really is just going to depend on you as an athlete. If your training performance is going up, if your scale is creeping up like 0.25 to 0.5 pounds a week, don't feel like you need to start eating more food just because you're 5, 6, 7 weeks into progression phase. 200 to 400 calorie surplus, that doesn't need to be changed. So until you hit those plateaus where training seems to stall a little bit, your scale weight has been consistent for 2 to 3 weeks, that's when you can push. Or if you're feeling really burnt out, that might be a time to kind of pull back on calories for 2 weeks, improve your insulin sensitivity, and then climb back up. So I don't think these little mini cuts are a problem, especially if a longer off-season phase, anything above like, let's say 4 to 6 months. If you're going 8-month progression phase, I highly suggest every 2 to 3 months doing a 2 to 3 week, let's say mini cut, where you're pulling your calories back, let's say 600 to 800, increasing cardio a little bit, increasing steps, reducing a little bit of body fat, increasing that insulin sensitivity, and then pushing right back into that surplus. And how long should a progression phase be? And this one is, it runs the gamut. You can do a progression phase for as little as 2 months. I recommend capping it at about 6 to 8 months before deficits kind of pull back down. You don't have to do a show or anything, but do a a kind of deficit phase where you can get back down to, let's say, 10 to 12% body fat if you've crept up closer to, let's say, 16, 18%, and then you can push again. But I think having those phases where you get back down to a really, really good body fat percentage does a couple things. Number one is, we talked about, improve those health markers, insulin sensitivity. Another thing is just reduces that kind of fatigue of doing the same thing over and over and over again. Like if you're doing a push phase for like 2 years, you're just gonna get so burnt out on just eating in a small surplus every single day with no changes. You're gonna feel like, you know, just sluggish. So if you can do these like cuts every so often, at least every 6 to 8 months, I think it's really, really beneficial. So to clarify, everything I've covered thus far in this video is for both natural and enhanced lifters. None of those principles change. So I'm gonna get a little bit into enhancement and what I think really helps specifically in a progression phase for enhanced athletes. And just to clarify, this is not medical recommendation, so please speak to your doctor before performing any type of exogenous PEDs and putting things in your body. Make sure you're running frequent blood work. It is going to be immensely important for your health. Let's talk about actual androgens. Let's stay away from orals completely. If you are taking orals in your off season, it's probably gonna down-regulate your digestion. It's gonna, you know, hurt with your ability to uptake food. It might get some GI issues. It's gonna be harder on your liver and kidneys, especially with the increased amount of food you already have and inflammation. So what I would suggest is completely injectable. So test base is always gonna be the number one. If I'm just talking to a beginner that wants to become enhanced, testosterone, it's bioidentical, it's already in your body. I would say a longer acting ether. You don't wanna be doing a short ether. You wanna be doing a test E or test C, which is going to give you that longer half-life. You don't have to inject as frequently, but if you're a beginner, simple test cycle. Now let's stack on top of that. I'd say Primobolan, if you get your hands on it, it's very hard right now. So I would say Masteron is my secondary. So those two are gonna be very, very effective at building muscle in a clean way. They're not gonna put on a ton of water weight. They're not going to aromatize and give you gyno, estrogenic side effects. And that's why I think they're so terrific. They usually have pretty minimal effect on blood work. The next one, if you can't get your hands on those, would be EQ. So this one is gonna have a little bit more of an effect on your lipids. For a lot of people, blood thickness, so you wanna definitely donate blood if you're taking EQ at a higher dose. But honestly, anything above 300-400, I think for EQ is really not gonna give you much more benefit than if you were just doing 300. And I think increasing a test or primo or mass is gonna be better than going super high on EQ, which you actually can stack on top of those. And then let's talk about the next one, which is growth hormone. So this is not a androgen, but it does have downstream benefits that will help you recover better, that will help you sleep better. And those things create a more growth promoting state for your body to be in. And so that's why a growth hormone paired with those androgens are gonna be really helpful. And lastly, let's talk about insulin. I know some people are like, oh, insulin's gonna kill you. Realistically, if you're eating a ton of food as an enhanced bodybuilder, what insulin does is essentially your pancreas is gonna produce insulin when you eat carbohydrates. So your pancreas, when you're eating 600, 700, 800 calories a day, is gonna be under extreme strain. So if you do a combination of like a fast acting pre-workout, like a Humalog, with some sort of medium acting, like a Humulin, R or N, those in a combination are gonna actually take strain off of your pancreas. They're gonna shoot those nutrients right to where you want it, to your tissue. You just have to be really safe. Have carbohydrates on hand, have glucose tabs. You do not want to be going hypo with none of these things with you in your gym bag. So it can be an effective tool. I personally say anywhere between 4 and 8 IUs pre-workout, and then maybe another 2 to 3 of your biggest meals throughout the day can be a very effective way to obviously promote growth, but also take some, load off your pancreas and shoot those nutrients right to where you want them. And paired with growth hormone can be extremely growth promoting. Okay, so biggest mistakes. I won't spend too much time on it because it's essentially the opposite of everything I try to teach you how to do on this video. So don't think too much about scale weight. If you're seeing like 2 to 5 pound increase a week, you're just getting fat. Don't try to focus too much on increasing calories too often. Usually once you find that slight surplus, it's not going to change all that much over the course of your progressive phase. If you start with your surplus at 3,800, it ends at 5,800, you're probably doing something wrong. You haven't put enough muscle on or changed your expenditure so much so that you need to be eating 2,000 calories from one, part of your progression phase to the next. Obviously getting too fat, becoming insulin resistant, taking your bulk too far. All the things we talked about in this video are the biggest mistakes you might be making. So that is going to wrap this video up. I hope you guys are loving this more informational based series. We're putting a lot of time into these videos to get you the information. So I hope you guys appreciate it. Comment down below what you guys want to see more of. Also make sure to get your Torque gear, get the Sculpted app, get your HTLT supplements, and I will catch you guys on the next video.